name?
Richard Kenneth Travis,
And what's your date of birth?
February 15th, 1931.
And do you know that you're being videotaped? This interview is being videotaped?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Geneva, Illinois.
And what was your family doing there at the time?
Well, my dad was a mechanic. He had just started a business as a mechanic. He'd been raised on a farm, but he was a good mechanic. And my mother ran right next door at our home. She ran a little restaurant and bar, right, converted our living room to a bar, so they could pay for the business that they had started, both businesses.
So they started both businesses during the Depression?
They went?
They started both businesses during the Depression?
Yes, yeah.
And
yeah, back in, well, actually, just before the Depression started, they got started, just late 20s.
Do you remember the Depression?
Oh, yes.
What do you remember from that?
Well, of course, we didn't realize there was a depression on it because we had probably a half-acre garden, and my mother canned goods and so on for us. And we had chickens and so on because we had a couple acres where we were at, and so we did all right. You know, we didn't, as young kids, we didn't realize there was we heard about a depression. My dad always said, watch how you spend your dollars. So.
Well, when did you first get exposed to the outdoors?
Well, I was outdoors all the time because my folks were working most of the time, so my sister and I had to just kind of take care of ourselves, and we were surrounded by farmland and so on, and so I was hunting at an early age with a little .22 rifle. My dad had one that was about 100 years old that he gave me.
And then where did you go to school? Where did you go to the grade school?
It was Wasco, Illinois, where I was raised, a little town outside of Wasco is where we lived. And it was Wasco grade school.
And that was a public school?
Yeah.
And where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Elgin, Illinois, a larger community. My dad had sold the business, and we'd sold out all the business and moved to Elgin, which was a sizable town. Elgin watches were made there, and a lot of other factories and so on. So it was a large school.
And what year was that you graduated?
It was 1950.
Okay, so what happened next after you graduated?
Well, I started work at Toastmaster Toasters, a manufacturing plant right near where we live. And the Korean War had started, and so I decided to volunteer for that. So I volunteered.
So that was the summer of 1951? Summer of 1950?
I went into the military in January of 1951.
So the war was going already?
Yeah.
And which branch of the service were you in?
It was in the Marine Corps.
And did you take your training on the East Coast or the West Coast?
I did. One of the last to go to Parris Island from there, because after that, my buddy joined the Marine Corps a couple of months after I had gone in, and he had to go to California down in San Diego for boot camp training for Marines.
So what did you train as in the Marines? What was your job?
Well, it was OCS 300, so it was a ground pounder, field Marine, you know.
Infantryman?
Infantry, yeah.
So when you finished your basic training, where were you assigned?
Well, I had done all right in the boot camp, and I chose seagoing training, which was up in the Norfolk area where they trained us. And from there I got aboard a ship, the USS Mississippi, a battleship, built in 1917. So it was a ship that was in World War I. And in World War II, the superstructure was blown off, so they had to redo it, and they redone the whole thing and dropped the big cannons on the ship and converted it to a radar experimental ship. So they had 5 and 6 inchers on there, but
So they had a complement of Marines and you were assigned there?
but they had Marine detachment, you know. I don't know how big it was. It was maybe 30 guys.
And then where'd you go?
Well, we didn't go anywhere other than out in the Atlantic around and shot drones, Hellcat drones out of the air. And that was it, other than pulling guard duty on ship or in port there. It was kind of called the Be Back Friday deal. So we went out a week and came back on Friday, which I was kind of demoralized because I thought I was going to sail around the world and do something, and that ship didn't do it. I thought, you know, I was, well, a lot of my buddies got to sail all over the world, you know, aircraft carriers and so on, that I graduated from sea school. But so I had to do some thinking, and I thought, well, how am I going to get off this ship? Because they had a 2-year requirement to stay aboard on, you know, your assignment. And a lot of the guys says, we've all tried. He says, Travis, you'll never make it. And I said, well, isn't there a way? He says, there's only one way, and you got to have political influence. You got to go up and see a senator of your state. And I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I hitched up to Washington, D.C., and I went to Everett Dirksen's office. Mansfield was there at the time, but I was from Illinois, and Everett Dirksen was the head of the Senate at the time, leader. And I knocked on his big door, and the secretary, a man about Everett Dirksen's age, was running the show. Everett wasn't there, and I told him what I wanted. And he said, you want what? I said, I want to go to the front lines of Korea. And he says, why would you want to do that? I said, well, the assignment they gave me is not what I look for to, so I thought I should be doing something that I feel like contributing. He says, well, okay. He says, I'll give the senator all of this message, and I'll contact a brigadier general in the Marine Corps too, and he will contact you. So that's what happened. In the meantime, I thought in high school I wanted to be a smoke jumper because it was 1949. I was a senior that year. And I noticed in Life magazine this guy's laying on the hill, and the smoke was down in the valley, and it was the 49 fires, you know, at that time. And I thought, man, that's kind of what I want to do. And so I thought after I got out of the service, that's what I was going to actually do, is come out here and become a smoke jumper.
So what happened after you went to Washington? How long did it take you to get a new assignment?
Well, the general wrote me a letter, and he said, Travis, or Private Travis, he says, I can't get you off there right away, but I can get you off after you've been there 1 year. So I had to stick it out 1 year. And lo and behold, a letter comes in the mail to me from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and said I'm relieved. So I took it into my commanding officer, major of the aboard ship there, and gave him that letter. And he says, Private Travis, what in the world do you want to do that for? He says, we've got a good deal here aboard ship. He says, you get 3 meals a day and you're out of harm's way. He says, what? And I said, well, this is what I want to do. And shook his head and says, well, okay, I'll sign it. But it was crazy. And then that particular major was reassigned, and we got a captain in as a gung-ho captain, and he was all for me leaving the ship. So it was just a few days later he came in and he welcomed me and sent me on my way, and I saluted the ensign of going off that ship, and after I went down the plank I yelled, Yahoo! It's a wonder they didn't court-martial me then.
So where'd you go directly?
Well, I had to go to Camp Pendleton for combat training first. So they gave me a 10-day pass and some time to go home and get ready to go to the combat training. And in the fall, why it was, I don't know, August, I guess, I started combat training that particular year, which was 52 at that time. And from there, it sent me right over the front lines.
Which unit?
It was this 1st Marine Division, what was the 7th Marines.
What did you see when you got there?
What's that?
What do you remember seeing when you got there?
Well, we had to go over by ship, so it took us about 19, 20 days to get over there. We had to stop at Japan at Kobe overnight, and then from there we went on the inside passage in the southern route of Japan, and we got into Incheon, and from there we had to take a train from there to Seoul, and then up to the front lines from there.
And where were the front lines at that time?
Well, it was Kaesong. It was in North Korea. It was just out of Kaesong, the Marine Division. The Army was to our right, and like Port Chop Hill and so on. We had the group to the left, which was a number of outposts to the left of them, looking towards the North Korean line.
So there was a Kaesong in Korea as well as in Vietnam?
No, yeah, there was a Kaesong right there in just south of Prang Nang, towards the main line of resistance there. They had drawn a line at that time. So.
Was the whole thing stabilized? Had the Chinese come in by then? Or?
Yeah, we faced the Chinese.